Hey leopards, it's time to foil and it's time to plaster. This video comes to you in two parts. It is completely, artists, intended for you to use multiple weeks, okay? Don't try to do this all in one art time. It really isn't possible, and it's definitely not possible to do it well. So, what I'm reminding you is the equipment you have in the bag you picked up for mask foiling and plastering. They are in the lobby still here at Lantern Road, and they are in big white plastic bags. Inside, you will find the things you need for part 1 and part 2 of this video. So I'm holding up a sign. I know it says part 1 backwards, but if you're fast forwarding or trying to rewind back to the start of foiling, I want you to be able to see where part 1 begins. So I'm gonna hold up a fake face, which is in your mask making kit. I need this back at the end of the project. You could bring it back on the last day of school and have your grown-ups drop it off, but I do need it back. And especially since you're 4th graders and I won't be seeing you next fall, I really would appreciate it if you bring this back, as this is something I use over and over and over every year. The reason we use a fake face is because it's no longer really safe to build masks on each other. That's what Mrs. Billman did back in school, but it's really not safe to have some of these substances on your skin of your face. So we use a fake face, and if you are creating a Kabuki theater mask that's a human actor, you probably won't need to foil much. But we do wrap this in foil, and we build up the facial features for our mask in foil, cardboard, and I'm actually gonna use some wine corks that were donated too, so that I can build my mask up to look more like a cat, which is what my Kabuki mask plan was. So the first thing we're gonna do is protect this fake face by wrapping it completely. And this is going to sound and look crazy, but I'm asking you, as a teacher that has done this for 27 years with kids, I'm asking you to trust me that this is the best way to wrap this fake face. So those of you working from home, you're gonna unfold that big sheet of foil that's in your mask making kit. This is gonna get a little loud as the foil rattles around. So I wanna tell you that although this looks kinda weird, I want you to hold the mask against your belly. Hold the foil against your belly. And then you're gonna put that fake face nose right in your belly button. I'll back up so you can see better, okay? Now, with it held nicely right there, wrap this foil into the mask. It's not gonna look good, and that's okay. Now it looks like the weirdest baked potato you've ever seen, and it doesn't look like anything great yet. So go ahead after you've got it wrapped and push the foil into place so that it looks pretty smooth against the mask form. After you do this, it's time to start building up the things on your mask that your plan demands. If you're making a human, this already looks fairly human, although kind of robotic. And you may only want to build up the cheeks a little bit. If your actor is frowning, you may want to build them thicker right by the mouth. When we frown, our cheeks get a little puffier right here by our mouth when our lips turn down. And when we smile, of course, our cheeks bunch up under our eyes. So I'm gonna show you how I made some bulkier pieces to represent a cat's face, because of course this doesn't look like a cat, and sticking some ears on it isn't gonna make it look like a cat either. So as I turn my camera view, making sure that you can see within the camera view, I'm gonna show you how to foil and junk construct your fake face. This is called armature, and if you think of a strong arm holding something up, that's where we get this name. This armature that we build is going to be holding up our plaster in part 2. Now I know from experience that when I use some scraps of foil, I can mold it around almost like clay. And cats, when I've seen them in pictures, because I'm very allergic, this is the only kind of cat I can be around, have a upside down triangle fatter, flatter nose than humans. So I lightly crushed my foil into this sort of upside down triangle that's fatter and flatter. And look at this, artist. I'm just gonna masking tape it down. And there is masking tape in your mask kit. This is going to be the worst looking cat you've ever seen anybody make, because this is what holds the plaster up. This is not the pretty part. And if you've seen cats or pictures of them, they have puffier cheeks than humans that come right up under their nose and make this line under their nose that leads to their mouth. So I lightly crushed a little basketball of foil, and I'm gonna tape that down. I apologize that you could probably hear this table creaking. It might even shake the camera a little bit. I didn't realize when I set up my camera arm that this table's quite that woggly and it squeaks. I need to put some WD-40 on it so it'll stop making that noise. You may not be able to hear it at all. It's bothering me, I'll tell you that. So now I've got a fatter, flatter nose, more cat-like. I've got some puffier cheeks. And my cat, I want this cat to look serious. So I'm gonna make this cat's forehead built way up. And I'm gonna use wine corks to do it. So this is where the cat's eyebrows would be. And it's gonna give him kind of a meaner, more serious look, because I really want these angled eyebrows painted on later. So I'm gonna give a nice bone structure to these eyebrows, exactly where I want them. When you are done constructing what you think you need to for your Kabuki style monkey, cat, fox, rabbit, human, then you are done until part 2. You can do this with your plan to guide you in one art class time. The next part, part 2, I'm holding up a part 2 sign. Yes, I know it's backwards. So that you know where in this video to begin your second, and even if you need it, third day of foiling and plastering. You will find in your mask kit that I gave you plenty of sheets of plaster gauze. You're gonna need to make sure you don't get this wet until you're ready to use it. And you're going to need a small container of water. It needs to be kind of low, not a tall, tall cup, because you're gonna need to dip your pieces of plaster into this. To construct our mask, it's important to use the plaster correctly, because this is not something you have a great amount of extras of in your kit. You also probably don't have these things around your house. The most important part of the mask is what holds it all together, and that's the edge. What I want you to realize is that we never plaster around the edge of the face form to the back. All of our mask will be built on the front. You want to take one piece and fold it while it's dry. Fold it while it's dry, fold it while it's dry. And then you dip it like a nacho chip in cheese. There's no good art term for this other than this. Smush this around. You're breaking up the dry plaster now that it's wet, and you're making sure it's stuck in all kinds of spaces in this plaster gauze. This is exactly like what doctors use to make a cast if you break your arm. I am taking the folded edge that's nice and pretty, and I'm making it into the edge of my mask. Once I lay this down on the mask form, it's a little easier to smooth. What I don't want to do is, I don't want to squeeze the plaster out of the fabric gauze. The reason is simple. The plaster is basically the glue that holds this together. You don't want to squeeze it out onto your tablecloth or onto your newspaper if that's what you laid down to protect your work surface. You don't want it anywhere but on the mask holding it together. We're going to fold again. It's way easier to fold this dry than to fold it after you dip it. So don't dip it first, fold it first. I'm gonna do that smushing. I'm not squeezing the plaster out, I'm smushing it around within the gauze or the fabric, and I'm making sure this ugly edge that's very ratty and tattered is on the face. I'm also going to, and I hope you can see this, artist, I'm checking that it's in the camera view, I'm gonna overlap my edge pieces. And I'm gonna smooth them together. And artists, this smooths together so nicely. You almost can't tell. But you do wanna overlap a little bit so that this doesn't break apart. I'm gonna keep going until I'm done with the edge. When I finish the edge, artists, I should have all the ratty, tattered, yucky edges facing the face. My nice edge, my folded edge, should become the edge of my mask. See that? This ratty one's getting rattier the more I touch it. I didn't overlap this one by much, so I'm gonna scoot him. I'm basically just dragging him, okay? Overlapping and smoothing a bit. All right. Don't attempt to cover all the holes in the gauze. You never will. Gauze has a crazy, crazy amount of holes. This is my second to last folded piece because I can tell how much more I need. It's gonna take 4 or 5 folded pieces for the edge. And I'm gonna try to keep scooting this around so you can see. I'm sure you can tell by the camera view that I've got a piece of a tablecloth I cut apart for my workspace to protect it. You can use a placemat. Like I said before, you can use some newspaper if you still get a newspaper. You can use a piece of cardboard from an old Amazon box, but I would definitely put something down to protect your work surface. This will wash out of clothes. It'll wash off of hands. It will, once it's dry, you can pop it or chip it right off of surfaces, and you can clean it up with water. It's just a good idea to have very little cleanup because this is for sure messy. So here is my last piece, and I'm gonna turn this in a strange way so that you can see this piece overlaps my first and my last. And I'm gonna smooth them together. And this is gonna look like a mask that has a toothache. See that? He's got gauze, plaster gauze, all the way around his poor face. Now, this is where the folding stops and the smushing gets a little harder. You are going to leave your pieces unfolded so that they cover more territory. We folded our edge pieces because the edge gets touched the most, therefore it's the weakest part of your mask. People do not pick the mask up by its nose. So when you dip an unfolded piece, you gotta be kind of careful how you smush it. I've smushed it around, and I'm gonna start covering the face with unfolded pieces. I'm gonna smooth it into my old pieces, and yes, they should overlap a bit. It's gonna take 5 or 6 pieces to cover your face, depending on how much you've built up. I've got some kids in the art room that are using toilet tissue tubes for some of their building. They're using them mostly for making the bridge of the nose, which is where your glasses sit if you wear glasses, bigger and fatter and wider if they're making an animal that has a fatter, wider bridge on their nose than a human. And you can probably hear that table squeaking. So as Mrs. Billman keeps building on camera, you're gonna notice that I'm overlapping, but I'm not overlapping by any more than I have to. I'm still trying to cover as much as I can. This will smooth down against your armature or the tough, strong stuff you built underneath. Once you're done building with your plaster, you're gonna let this dry until the next art class next week. You are waiting for a video about painting and decorating, and that is to come in the future. You won't find it posted yet because it hasn't even been created yet. But you definitely want dry plaster before you hot glue and paint. I should have said that in the other order because you don't hot glue until you've painted. So I'm on one of my last pieces. I'm gonna try to get this to overlap here and here. Yeah, I'm gonna need 2 more pieces to finish covering my foil and tape. And then artists, I will show you how to pop these apart in the next video so that you are totally prepared to paint. But I will not show you how to pop these apart and the correct way to do it in this video because I don't want you to get antsy and do it too soon. I do want you, when you get to what you believe is the end, to go on a little patrol with your mask. Right here, there's foil showing. It's hard to see, so I'm actually gonna have to use 2 pieces to finish. Even though I don't have much to cover here, I'm gonna need to cover that hole. So I'm gonna use this diagonally to get the most coverage out of it. Nope, I didn't need 2, I just needed 1, but I had to make sure that hole got covered because a hole now equals a hole later. It will dry with a hole, a big one, and it makes your mask less stable, and it means it could fall apart. It doesn't look like I got good coverage right here, so I am gonna have to use 1 more piece to make sure that that got covered. It's actually a hole, so I wanna make sure that it's covered up completely so that my mask is good and strong. This got flipped around a little bit. If you're having trouble with the cloth and plaster seeming kind of floppy, lay it on your mask. It's much easier to control it and kind of drag it around if you lay it down and let the mask help you. All right? Go on a little patrol for holes. Not tiny ones in the gauze, those are okay. Big holes separating pieces of gauze where they don't overlap well or don't overlap at all are gonna equal a hole in your mask later. So now we have my cat's face with its bigger puffy cheeks, its fatter, flatter nose, and its very severe bone structure under the eyebrows that I will paint on later. You will clean up your work area, especially if you're working from home, because it's very, very likely your work area is a shared family space. And you should not leave this out where doggies, kitties, and babies could get to it. Make sure your grown-ups help you clean up your plaster water. This is not something you want to just dump down the sink. Ask them where you should dump it. Most likely they will tell you in the trash. If you have extra plaster and it is perfectly dry, I would love to have that back as well, or save it. And if you have a hole in your mask, you'll be able to patch it up with your plaster gauze now that you know how to use it. Be on the lookout for a video showing you how to paint and then how to decorate after you have spent your time plastering or possibly 2 art times plastering. Because, ladies and gentlemen, and all artists, you may plaster and then come back and finish it if you don't get done. So adding wet plaster to dry is not a problem. It will dry just fine. It might have a bit of a different color to it, but that's not a problem since we're going to be painting a great amount of our work.